So, here we go. iPhone 8 Plus. Volume / mute switch / power button, rear flash, or rear microphone. If I had to guess, so I'll point out a couple of things. If you're having camera problems, like let's just say if your camera is just blacked out, it doesn't work, and your flash doesn't work, the likelihood is that it's just your camera. Try replacing your rear camera first before jumping into this repair specifically for a flash. If your microphone is an issue, honestly, order one of these just in case, because you might damage it in the process of trying to take it out. But sometimes it literally is just dirty. The mesh is just clogged with debris. That can also be the case with there's not a switch here. That's something we have to transplant during the repair. I'll go over that later, obviously. But if you can't flick your switch up and down, if there's no up and down movement, literally, I do this all the time, where you just clean out one end, then you flick it, clean out the other end. It gets you a little bit more movement, and then what is it? Wash, rinse, repeat, I guess is the saying. Try that a couple more times. Literally, sometimes that's it. Spongy buttons, like let's just say if they're depressed, I've seen it where the screws will unthread themselves. So you might not even you'll still need some of this stuff because you have to remove the battery. But if, let's just say your screws are unthreading, if it's over here, you can get away without taking out a lot of stuff. You can literally just take out you can take out the battery and then tighten those screws, without having replaced, essentially any part whatsoever, and then wham bam, you're back in business. If the power button is the issue, then you basically need to take out the board to get to that, because you don't have you need access to it. But still, there's a possibility that if the thing just doesn't click, put it this way, don't rule out, if you don't have to replace the part, don't replace the part. But still, like I said, there's a possibility that you might damage this in the process of working on it. They're not very expensive. I want to say that it's certainly less than $10. But, so you've checked all that and you still have an issue. Well, let's move on to the repair. A couple of things that we're going to need. Obviously, the part itself. I get mine from Injured Gadgets or Mobile Centrics. They're a great place. Like I said, they're not very expensive. There are quite a few reputable vendors on eBay. My suggestion is sometimes they're sold without this metal bracket or without these metal brackets. I'm telling you, stay away from those. It is the amount of work that you're going to have. It is absolutely mind-boggling, the amount of work you're going to have to do to save $3 or $2. Spend the extra money, get the brackets. You'll thank me later. Or you won't, because you won't have gone through all that effort, but I hope you understand. So, parts. Not parts. Out of the different things that we're going to need, I mentioned this in every video, you need something to keep track of your screws. Magnetic mat. You can also use packing tape, flip it upside down. You just want something that you can place the screws on without them getting lost or mixed up with other screws. All screws are different sizes. It also helps if, let's just say you're not doing this in one setting. I don't know, you do this right before dinner or right before a meal, and then you're on the kitchen table or something. You got to pick up your screws. You don't want them moving around on just a plate. I've seen all different kinds of things. If you do this semi-often, get a magnetic mat. Next, we are going to have to remove the board and the battery for this repair. So I would suggest, depending on how much adhesive gets pulled out, you might want to spend an extra couple of bucks. I'd say at least maybe one or two of them, because sometimes you can mess up on the first, and that way you have a second. For the perimeter gasket, it doesn't make your phone water resistant, so please don't expect that. But it does add in, what is it? It's like, I was going to say sound dampener. It's not a sound dampener. It keeps the screen from clicking up against the frame, and yeah. If I typically will only put in another if the majority of the adhesive is missing. Next, we have to remove the battery, so we need some sort of adhesive. Once again, these aren't very expensive, but you can essentially get these pre-cut adhesives, and they, as you can see, this is where the wireless charger is. I'll go over that in a bit. As far as actual tools, in no particular order, we're going to need a pentalobe, a Phillips, a Y000. I get mine from iFixit. We're also going to need a standoff for some special screws. We're going to need an opening tool and one, possibly two. Yeah, it helps to have a straight set of tweezers for removing the battery tabs. A source of heat is a good option, so you can use a hair dryer if you have an actual heat gun, one of those like paint strippers. That's essentially what I have here. It's just, this is purpose for soldering and electronics. And then for the battery tabs, I use a couple of drops on each strip. 99% is what I have, isopropyl alcohol, but you can also get away with just using 91. Stay away from 70%. That's pretty much it. If I've left something out, if you think I've left something out, just make sure to comment down below. Also, I'm going to mention this ahead of time. I realize this is slightly premature, but if you like the video, please give it a like. It greatly helps me out. With that said, let's get started. So pretty much every iPhone starts out with removing your two pentalobes. You then take your opening tool. From the edge of my nail to the edge of the opening tool, you really don't want to stick it in the phone too much, as you run the chance of, like, your home button is under here, your LCD flex is here. Especially if you're reusing your screen, you want to take as much precaution as not, to not damage the screen. Your ear speaker flex is here, but it's kind of hard to damage that. But heating up the perimeter of the screen helps. The technique that I have, if you don't feel comfortable running along the edge, is you can just twist to open. And then you need to rotate this corner down. Now, I've already opened this, but if you've never opened your phone, your adhesive is probably going to be a little bit stronger. But typically what you might have to do is just sort of wiggle it back and forth, and we're getting past 1, 2, so 1, 2, and 3 brackets. Now, I've already pulled some parts out of this phone. The retaining brackets, there are 4 pentalobe, there's 2 pentalobe, 4 Phillips. So we're gonna use our imaginations and pretend that's there. I forgot about this during the required, I guess it's not technically required, but I'd highly suggest it. Use the pointed end of your spudger. First and last thing that we disconnect is always the battery. You can either use your fingernail, but for the sake of visibility, there are components that are immediately underneath, or maybe not underneath, but here and here. So the sort of safe area is to the side. You then can take and just use the wedge, lift up, take our screen, and set it aside. Now, at this point, we need to remove. So I'll mention this for just a sec. If you have spongy buttons, pretty much the easiest way to tell at this point is just to, you'll see the screw unthreading. These aren't, but pretty much just identify one, or in some cases all 3. There's 3 here, there's 3 here. If that's the case, just make a mental note, and if they're, like I said, if they're on this side, you can literally just remove the battery and then tighten those screws and then put everything back in without basically gutting half the phone. Obviously, if it's on this side, you don't have to remove the battery. You can just remove the board. So just know, obviously, if it's both, or if you need to, obviously, if you're going to replace the device, then whatever, just follow along. when removing the camera, you just sort of use that motion. The metal housing it's not as fragile as you think. So I mean, by all means, don't go heavy on it. But and also, if you're going to what do you call it? If you're going to do this in one sitting, less than an hour, not that big of a deal. But if you're if you're not planning on finishing this in a relatively short period of time, I'd highly suggest taking the camera, setting it in a bag of some sort, as just so it doesn't get dusty. I've already pulled the camera out of this and used it in another repair, but it's just at this point a placeholder. So back to the repair. We're going to remove a couple of other screws for the board, the SIM card tray. To get access to the battery, I need to remove, I don't need, but it lowers the possibility of tearing the battery strips. So we're going to remove the Taptic engine. So let's do that now. There is the flex here. Just lift up. So as you can see, the flex is right here. Looks just like that. So with any of these flexes, you just want to lift gently. I mean, you'll notice there is, like this is the charge port, for instance. So I'll do my best to get that on video. But just so you have an idea, when you have a little bit, there's there's essentially a little bit of an area, rigid area, immediately next to the actual connector itself, and you can lift up without damaging the. I mean, be gentle, but you don't have to baby it. So that's our board. Now for the battery strips, I use, and I mentioned this in the intro, but I use 91% or 99%. So I mentioned this in the intro, but I use 99%. You just as easily can get away with 91%. But at least the technique that I have is I start the tab first, and I get to this section. If you put the drops in immediately, it has a tendency to not grip very well. So I put 3 drops there. And I don't think it'll look any different to you. But for anyone that has removed battery strips, it will feel dramatically easier. It's much smoother. The adhesive doesn't get caught. Now, this strip, for whatever reason, has a tendency to tear the overwhelming, maybe not overwhelming, but certainly the majority of the time. And the technique that I have is if that tears, and essentially which I'm going to assume it is, it's literally that frequent. So I start off are going to have to remove this. We might as well just do it now. So now that we've got this strip, like I said, you sort of just get it started. Three drops. And there we go. The black tab came off. So yeah, this doesn't want to come out. All right. Almost using the whatever spaghetti twirling method. You just want to get enough to grip. If you have it in this position and it's starting to fight you, use another drop. I also like pulling at an angle. If you are reusing this particular flex, be very careful. This one has a tendency to tear right where it goes from thick to thin. Which is one more reason that the adhesive helps. Like I said, it sort of takes away the stickiness. 1, 2, 3. Something else that you can do is if you want to get it away, is just start pulling out. This is the longer of the two, so the first starts from here, goes to here. This one extends a little bit further, so sometimes it's easier. You can get it away from that flex, pull it out the side. So now we come back. All right. So this one's not going to tear. If yours, actually, you can see it right there. Sometimes literally it does that, and then it just shreds. If that happens to you in this lower right, pretty much, or honestly, even if it happens here, the technique that I have is ideally you want this one, and this one is the easiest. Remove these three. If this one is torn, then you take a couple of drops. If the board is out, you can apply a few drops from this end. Literally at this point you would, some people call me crazy, but just wedge just a little bit, enough, and then just start rocking it back and forth, and then it will literally just come out. The alcohol, like I said, it basically takes away the stickiness of the battery tabs. So I hope that doesn't happen to you, but if it does, that's the technique that I use. And you don't want to bend the battery too much, as ideally that's something you're reusing. So now we're here. Next step. I don't know why they feel it necessary to do this, but there is a piece right there that covers up these two. I know I did part of this out of order, but if you need essentially the mic and the flash are held down with this little piece right here, so you need to remove this antenna, that plate, and essentially now we have all of there's nothing standing in the way. So I'd suggest using heat, but in some cases you actually don't need it. But you pull this out for this end. And you can sort of pull this out. There's no adhesive on the flash, but there is on the rear mic. Voila. So these are our buttons. Now at some point I'll probably make a different video about this, but if you have a button that's jammed, this is also a possibility that can happen. I've seen it where people will drop something and it lands on, like, I don't know, a brick or something, and then it sort of indents the button. And there's one of two or both which is to replace the button, and sometimes you actually have to file out the inside of the where the button rests, the inside of the frame where the button is positioned. I've had that happen before. I've also had it happen where, I mean, literally you take the button out, you file the button down a little bit, and then you file down the inside just so that because literally they can get jammed in place. So that's one. If they are sticky, I mean, sometimes it's worth it to literally just clean them out from the outside. If that still doesn't work, then the method is to pull off these hoops, which literally I don't bother. This is one of the very, very, very few things that I will not reinstall. I do not understand their purpose. I have done into the hundreds of these repairs, housing replacements where you transfer this bracket and this button, and I've never once had the lack of those hoops an issue. But the bracket comes off at a 90-degree angle, rotates up, and then you just pull out, just like that. And then you pop this out from the other side, and sometimes you'll have a button that's just really dirty, in which case, I mean, literally get a Q-tip, whatever, get something, clean it out. Same thing here. Sometimes they literally can get, especially if you get, like, I don't know, juice or something sticky, the button just won't work as well. And sometimes the issue isn't actually the flex, it's just, sticky button or dirty button. So once you're putting it back on, take your finger, press down. If the buttons are original, you shouldn't have to fight them too much. Once again, press down on the button. If you don't, then sometimes the bracket won't align right, which ultimately it won't click right. You'll hear an audible click. You should feel it. And that's that. Now, the next step is, now if yours comes this way, or if you don't want to, I've seen where sometimes the replacement part comes with this volume or the mute switch. Depending on, I'll show you how. If yours is on there and you don't want to mess with it, I don't blame you. This is kind of a pain. But there are two, so there's 1 and 2. They're sort of almost like a spring, and you literally just have to bend it upwards. I'll show another angle in just a sec, but you bend it, as you can clearly see, bent, and then you can sort of, you might need to bend it up even more. Boom. There's your switch. In order for these to work, and I'm not going to reuse this, at least in this video. But in order for this to work, so this is our new part. As you can see, there's adhesive on it, or the strips, plastic strips over the adhesive. You need these little whatever hoop / springs to be flat. So with the volume buttons to the left, and you're holding the spring getting a good angle on this. It's kind of difficult. Okay. The red from the switch, as you can see, faces inward. So as you can see, red switch. This doesn't want to rest in my hand. Normally this doesn't matter, but I'm trying to do this on video. So let's do it this way. Okay. Red line facing inward. You literally just take this . Wiggle it back and forth, but you ultimately need to end up on this little black switch in the middle. You need to position some are more difficult than others. Okay, there we go. So it's supposed to look even. I was trying to do that with tweezers, and that just was not working out. So in this case, and then something else that I do is rock it back and forth, make sure that it feels right. It shouldn't be flopping around, or else when you drop it back in the housing, it just basically just won't work right because you only have so much room. So now that that's good, we take off whatever film take that off, take that off. I guess there's a tiny one right there. That's weird. There. Boom. I usually start with the volume. It is the longer, or one of the longer screws. Nudge it in place. Now I don't tighten it all the way. Next, I'll tighten the left. And one of the reasons you don't want to tighten this all the way is because you're going to have to position this, obviously rotate it down and into position. And if this is all the way tightened, the the knob on the button, which interacts with basically you can scrape off the, I guess there's no other word to use, but almost like the nipple, that black little dot there. So you don't want to tighten this all the way until it's in place. I've learned that the hard way. It's not a very expensive part, but still, if you don't have to damage something, don't damage it. There, once that's done, make sure the button clicks. So this is kind of annoying, but this might happen to you. So I will explore the possibility but sometimes this is just what happens with aftermarket parts. So I'm tightening, and you want to tighten these all the way, or these will come unthreaded at some point. But sometimes they're literally just too, that last, half turn, quarter turn is just too tight, and it won't click because the button mechanism is too close to the physical button. So you literally just have to unbend. You have to bend this way. I don't know if that would be concave or convex. Whatever, somebody tell me in the comments. And you just bend it ever so slightly. And that gives you enough room to work with. So you can tighten these all the way. And that's all I needed. sounds kind of, I don't know what word to use. It sounds kind of ghetto, but I mean, that's if. I mean, I have the advantage of going to my bag and taking out another one. Honestly, I don't even want to, because as far as I'm concerned, you can just unbend it a little bit and it works literally exactly the same. I mean, once again, it's annoying that you even need to do that, but whatever. So we then come in on the other side. Same thing, I don't, for a slightly different reason on this one, but on some of the wider or longer retaining brackets, if you tighten the first, you could be off by a fraction of a millimeter on the second and third screws. So I will tighten it most of the way, and then I will come back. This one's good. We can now move on to the rear mic. So make sure you can drop the flash in. You can clearly see a hole for the, this is an alignment pin. There's a little plastic pin that goes right, try to get this in focus, that goes right there. Once you have that, we can take our if you're watching the video, you can see, but this screw goes to the left. Make sure that you have enough room up top. If this flex doesn't want to stay in place, it's not that big of a deal, as it'll stay in place once the board is in, holding it down. An easy way to anchor in is to take the SIM and then this screw right here. Take our flex and, well, we just have to start reinstalling everything. All right, so this is exactly why you buy more of these. So, whatever. Caved in. Tracked down the Nate Plus. Now, luckily, they come with these handy, sort of like thicker plastic alignment, and you don't have to get it exactly right. You want the adhesive to obviously adhere as best as possible. So now that we have that, we come back here. We remove that. Now, probably should have mentioned this before, but you want to make sure that your flex is angled right. If it's not, well, take the time to do it. Now, it's important that essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect our battery first, then use it as a guide. That way it's centered vertically. The last thing you want to do is just drop it down, and then when you're in the process of trying to connect the battery, trust me, it's just a lot easier this way. I mean, I've had it sometimes where it's too high or too low, and then you literally need to take the battery out again because the flex isn't positioned right. So there's the battery. Keep it in place, and then literally just press down. Make sure to disconnect the battery again. Now, I am literally all out of, I have no adhesive left. So I'm going to clean this up just so that it mates, it adheres to the typically these will come as, the nicer ones come as a, and this this is, wait, is it? Yeah, I think this is one of those. But the nicer ones will come as a 3 layer. So the first layer I just removed. The second layer gives us easy alignment for the inside of the frame. That way you can align it. You'll see, I'm going to remove the second layer in just a sec. And the idea is, with 3 layers, is that you remove the second layer just like this. And you have the final layer in place so that you can connect. Before I do this, once again, make sure your battery is disconnected. But essentially the very last thing that you would do would be to pull this out, which I will do now. Now, some of these aren't the best, and they have a tendency to pull the adhesive up with it, which this is trying to do right now. So you want to be gentle, and where it doesn't, there you go. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but or if I didn't, I'm mentioning it now, but I have essentially repurposed these in another device. So we're going to use our imaginations and pretend that I put my retaining bracket in. Remember, 4 Phillips, the longer one is lower right, and then 2 tri-wing. Now once again, do not expect your device to be water resistant. We have this last one right here. Do not expect it to be water resistant. It's there just to keep the screen from tapping up against the screen of the frame. So, make sure, I mean, especially in a repair as intense as this, screws have a tendency, especially ones that you might have lost that you can't find. Sometimes they have a habit of getting stuck to either the Taptic engine or to the loudspeaker. I mean, they're essentially just magnets that are in there. So I have damaged more screens than I'd like to admit because I was in a hurry, or I didn't check, or I made an assumption. You know what they say about assumptions. And let's just say sometimes this will happen where it's on the a screw gets stuck to the loudspeaker, and then you go to close the phone and the lower right corner is sitting up. Well, when it's sitting up, what's your inclination to do? Press down, and then you immediately crack the LCD, or you damage the LCD. Great, now you're doing a screen replacement. So obviously I mentioned this earlier, but if you don't have to replace something, let's not replace them. And that's just money that doesn't need to be spent. Especially, well, there are really no exceptions. If we don't have to replace it, we don't have to replace it. So just be mindful of screws that got stuck to the perimeter adhesive, Taptic engine, and loudspeaker. This is going to go obviously in the opposite that it came out. So we're going to align the top corner, bottom corner. Oh, last thing, same rule here. Sometimes screws get stuck to the loudspeaker and it essentially rests in this little area right here. And there's very little tolerance. So can't emphasize that enough. Make sure there's no screws stuck to speakers or adhesive. And if you notice that something is sitting up, don't force it. There's probably a reason it's not sitting there. Try to mess around with it, try to find the problem before jumping to the conclusion that something is perfectly fine, because very often that leads to, a less than desirable result at best, and at worst, damaged components. Make sure that your flex here is sitting inside the phone, not outside. Last but not least, I apparently wasn't recording and I dropped these in anyway, but you don't need me for that. But make sure to put in your penalobes. And I'll just finish it up with this. I know this was a long video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope I have, taught you a few things along the way that you may or may not have known. I know I went down a lot of hypothetical scenarios that you may or may not have applied to you. But I wanted to make, pass on as much knowledge as I could, as there are obviously maybe not myriad, but there are quite a few different scenarios that could have applied in this particular repair. So if you learned something, please make sure to comment down below. What did you learn? If there's something you felt that I missed, or if there's, some advice that you got from another video, please feel free to mention it. We're all here to learn, hopefully be entertained along the way. If you have any questions or comments, once again, please leave them down below. And if you like the video, please make sure to smash that like button. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much, and see you next time.